'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe.
All this and more on this episode of Ask Hare and Hare.
But first, the news.
You are tuned to WNDR, the voice of Wonderland. I'm M. Turtle. Here are the headlines. The Department of Health has issued a statement warning of contaminated cakes and tea biscuits which have been anonymously distributed throughout the East. The pastries bear an invitation to consume them, and authorities warn that though they resemble Wonderland's ordinary cakes and cookies, eating them produces no effects at all, adverse or otherwise. Department of Health officials warn anyone who might find these pastries not to waste their time. The search continues for a family of oysters last seen along the shoreline. Reports from some eyewitnesses state that they were last seen with one man armed with a hammer and a second party identified as either a manatee or a walrus. In sports, the Queen of Hearts emerged victorious in yesterday's Royal Croquet Tournament in a blowout, 122-0. That continues Her Highness's eternal winning streak. The challenging field mouse will never be heard from or spoken of again, according to custom. Weather in the area, high winds off the coast are bringing showers of handshakes and hotcakes to the southeastern region. Be sure to bundle up. Ahead this hour, Hare and Hare field your questions on the topics of family burial practices and existential quandary. This is M. Turtle, and you are listening to WNDR. The time is 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29.
Hello, and welcome to Ask Hare and Hare. I'm Hare.
And I'm Hare. And we're here today to answer all those questions that you can't quite seem to answer yourself.
Let's jump right in, shall we?
Today's first question comes from Lauren V. via electronic mail.
Lauren writes, Dear Hare and Hare, my father passed away recently and is survived by just his sister and myself. She wants me to give her control of his remains, and here the author helpfully adds the word cremains in both parentheses and quotation marks. But seriously, I have seen her house, and I don't want him to spend eternity lost in it. How do I tell her no without hurting her feelings?
That's an excellent question, Lauren.
Truly.
There are a couple of very simple solutions here. First off, you can get out of saying no by just handing over the ashes. Now, bear with me here, Ratter.
Bearing.
See, you don't have to hand over the actual ashes. Do this. Go into the closet or over to the mantle or wherever you're currently keeping a dearly departed and open the urn. Without even looking, I can describe them. Grey, powdery, maybe a few chunks of bone if you skimped on a reputable crematorium. You know what leaves cremains like those?
What?
Literally every other living creature on Earth.
That is very technically true.
All you got to do, see, is find some other dead animal and burn it. Dump it in an urn or show box and bingo, bango, bongo, you've got a corpus de habeas.
Question.
Proceed.
What about the volume issue? A cat or a mole, even 6 or 8 moles, will not produce the same amount of ash as a human, correct?
That is correct. Now, I myself tend to seek out larger forest creatures. A buck or a bear. A single large bear will actually yield you 2 human bodies worth of cremains, believe it or not. So that'll save you time and effort the next time you got to pull a switcheroo. But say you don't have the time to buy in bulk, so to speak, and have to make do with animals around the neighbourhood. Well, I've found that the ash of both pine and beech trees make an acceptable filler. Or if you're in a real pinch, mix in a bit of powdered concrete.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, concrete really should be a last resort, though. At any rate, mix your animal cremains with the proper amount of filler, and there you go. Your aunt will never, ever know the difference. Trust me on this one.
And, of course, if you find all of this too taxing, there is always option B.
What's that?
Well, you could tell your aunt that your father faked his own death. I guarantee she'll lose all interest in the remains.
Though there will likely be other questions.
True.
But if she presses the issue and insists that your father contact her, you can simply and calmly explain that she is the very reason that he faked his own death, and that you felt bad and had to tell her, but, and you must remain adamant on this point, he never wants to speak to her again.
Ever.
Of course, if it turns out your father did fake his own death and appears out the blue many years later...
Well, won't your face be red?
Well, hope that about covers it. If anyone has any other suggestions for Lauren, won't you let us know at askhatterinair@gmail.com.
We're always willing to listen to even the stupidest of ideas. Now, next up, we've got a missive from young Wallace in...
Oh, no.
Damn it.
This is an alert from the Royal Emergency Proclamation Service. Please stand by for information and instructions from Her Royal Highness. This is an alert for the Royal Emergency Proclamation Service.
Now hear this, loyal subjects. We took the capital on the 16th day of the 23rd month of the People's Revolution. Once we breached the city walls, the government forces crumbled, and it was mere hours before we found ourselves on the balcony of the presidential palace, overlooking the great piazza where our comrades in arms had gathered, waiting to hear that the regime was no more. We pulled down the flag that had symbolized our long repression, but none among us had brought along our own, so we ran a pair of the ex-dictator's undershorts up the flagpole instead, and casually debated amongst ourselves what metaphor could be taken from it. Something about freedom, maybe, one of the captains said. He was an idiot, but we were too busy breaking open the necks of wine bottles to berate him. The people flooded into the palace as we watched, wrote elaborate battle stories on the walls, drew ornate mustaches on the portraits, made instruments of the pots and pans in the kitchens, took turns making love in the president's bed. In time, the once pristine marble halls were filled with the animal sounds and pungent musk of freedom. And the general, our savior, so austere, so stern in battle, softened finally with the victory and the wine, and looked on the proceedings with a sort of paternal pride, knowing that he had provided for his children. He turned to us, smiling for perhaps the first time in his long life, and made a joke. "My brothers," he said, "I only know how to fight, and the fight has been won." We laughed, and the laughter rippled through the halls as the joke was repeated, and it spilled out into the streets, this great joke that captured this moment of celebration, bought with 1,000 slaughters and a lifelong hunger. Laughter rippled through the streets of the capital, out into the countryside, to the furthest corners of the new republic. It filled the night. A new joke. The people's joke. We only know how to fight, and we only know how to fight, and the fight has been won. The fight has been won. And in the morning, we stood rumpled on the palace balcony and watched as the first rays of sunlight hit the underpants limply hanging from the flagpole, watched as it burned away the mist over the piazza and revealed the detritus of our revolution, now carpeting the city streets. The rubble, the soot, the spent shells and cigar butts and jagged green glass still sticky with wine. We looked down the alleyways to discover that the executive shorts weren't the only left hung out to dry. Our own collective story littered the clotheslines, sullied, airing out before mothers came home, though those mothers had likely hung their own garments elsewhere, having conspired in the night with their own contemporaries. Everyone a sweaty revolutionary in the dark. Would those mothers be able to look their children in the faces with any sort of moral authority over the breakfast table? We shuddered at the thought. A soldier, half out of rumpled fatigues, stumbled out of a splintered doorway, clutching his head in fresh regret. We watched him and whispered amongst ourselves, careful that the words not reach the general's ears. We saw this soldier. That was the consensus the night before, this pride of a nation dancing with the general's daughter right before she took her leave of us. The general didn't need our conjecture. With a dour countenance, he eyeballed the young soldier and muttered a note to himself. At some point, he would have to deal with the man. At some point. We returned our gazes to the street and realized with a sort of creeping terror that this mess, finally, was ours. Someone would have to be named to clean the city, to keep the utilities running, to educate the next generation. For that matter, someone would have to be named to do the naming. We felt an early pang of nostalgia for the revelry of the previous evening. Were we ever as young as we were last night? Would we ever be older than we were this morning? Someone, probably the idiot captain, broke the heavy silence. "Well, I only know how to fight," he said, but stopped before he reached the punchline. Even he knew that the joke wasn't funny anymore. That is all, loyal subjects.
This has been a broadcast of the Royal Emergency Proclamation Service. If you have received this message in error or have had difficulty with the transmission of this material, report at your own risk. Thank you for your mandatory participation. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yes. Thank you.
Our next missive comes from Wallace via Astrogram, the all-new astral projection technology from Microtort. Microtort, who asks that you think something. Anything.
Wallace?
Dear Hare and Hare, hi. I am writing you because I am your world's bestest fan ever, even though the policeman came to our school and told us we weren't allowed to watch your show anymore. But I like Hare because he's always sad, which makes me laugh, and Hare because he made that bad monkey go sleepy time forever when you both visited the zoo. That was awesome. Also, because you guys are the smartest ever and always know what to do when people have a problem that they can't tell anyone else because you'll get in big trouble if you do. I have a problem I can't tell anyone, and I really super hope you guys can help me. My problem is that after bedtime, scary bad things come out of the dark to stare at me. When I hide under the sheets, they whisper that free will is an illusion self-imbued upon the finite narrative of our consciousness, when in fact, our actions have long ago been determined by a series of preceding causes along with the neurological imprints they stamped upon the individuals who experienced or conversely did not experience them. So, my question is, are the scary bad things that whisper in my ear at bedtime right? Is there really no such thing as free will and I'm doomed to spend the rest of my life as a puppet to the twin bitches nature and nurture? Or are courage, love, dignity, sacrifice not a lie, and there is absolution of our inability to attain them because of the workings of a mechanistic universe? Thank you. Your world's bestest fan, Little Wally K, Beaver Ruin Road, Georgia.
Actually, before we get your question, Wally, I just want to correct you on something. It was a gorilla, not a monkey, that I put down. And Atta and I were at a nature preserve explaining how extinction worked. So, it was educational. And the thing was super old. So we was doing double duty as teachers and angels of mercy.
Also, to be fair, it was an accident.
Yeah, that too. Anyways, on to your question, Wally, which is something of an existential quandary, yeah? It's a tough one.
Yes, though I'm not entirely sure I buy into the premise of it.
Oh no? Why not?
I believe that we are, to a large degree, a product of conditioning, both on the cellular and psychological level.
Oh, yeah. Behavior is conditioned on all levels.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that things like dignity, sacrifice, etc. don't matter. They matter precisely because they feel like they matter. And because they are magnificent ways to occupy oneself on the road to non-existence.
Whether we make our own decisions or not, death is predestined.
Exactly. And the truth of the matter is, we shouldn't even be here. You, young Wallace, are an improbable collection of cells that somehow add up to a consciousness. which is crammed into a tiny, easily bruised sack of breathing meat, clinging perilously to the bare face of a rock, hurtling through space around a smallish yellow ball of gas that will one day itself wink out of existence. Everything is so fragile. Everything is so temporary. Nothing of your life will matter to you or anyone else once you are dead, and you will die. So why should it matter to you now? Kill your fears, young man. Your fears themselves are the pre-programmed response of a species forever trying and failing to escape the inevitability of death. And here's the advice you didn't ask for. Stare back at the scary things. They're just as scared of you, after all.
Unless they are not.
Unless they are not. But what does it matter either way? Remember, the universe is not cruel. The universe simply doesn't care. So why should you?
Good luck there, Wally.
Do follow up soon if you're able.
Well, that seems to be all the time we have for today.
Everything ends.
Remember to keep sending in your questions to askhatterandhare@gmail.com. We really do look forward to hearing from you.
After all, we live to serve.
You have been listening to Ask Hatter and Hare here on WNDR. Today's episode was written by Nicholas Tukoski with contributions from Rob Mosca and Mike Johns. Our podcast is edited by Grayson Bergman, with additional material recorded by Mike Johns. Music is by Paul Mercer. Thanks also to the continuing glorious guidance of Parker Davidson. Your voice talent today belonged to Gina Rikiki, Mike Johns, Bernard Sotero-Clark, and Nicholas Tukoski. Have a question for Hatter and Hare? You can get in touch at askhatterandhare.com. The Inverted Hour is ahead next. You are listening to WNDR. I'm M. Turtle. Thank you for joining us. The time now is hogwash.